comments, and we're going to go to Ms. Shanahan now. Go ahead, Ms. Shanahan. You have the floor.
Well, thank you very much, Chair, although, you know, people may not be thanking me. Chair, what to say about this motion? There's so many things going on here that I just really wonder if it wasn't for the fact that the member had brought it back a second time, so I take it he's reread it at least once. It seems like it was just written on the back of a napkin, maybe a napkin from, I don't know, a Quebec Convention Center or something. You know, there's a few things about the motion that I question, but I like to get to the business of, you know, just to clear the decks on the standing order front. I'd like to hear from the clerk on Standing Order 108-1A, because my reading of that standing order is it has to do with business that's referred to a committee from any from the House, and in fact, let me just see, as I think I might have it here handy. 108, the standing orders, powers of a standing committee, 1A, which is what is referred to here in this motion. Standing committees shall be severally empowered to examine and inquire into all such matters as may be referred to them by the House. So I just don't know if we have heard from the House on this, to report from time to time, and except when the House otherwise orders, to send for persons, papers, and records to sit while the House is sitting, to sit during periods when the House stands adjourned, to sit jointly with other standing committees, to print from day to day such papers and evidence as may be ordered by them, and to delegate to subcommittees all or any of their powers, except the power to report directly to the House. So I would like to hear from the clerk on this, because it seems to me that it's a mistake, it's a misprint, it's a mistyping, or maybe there's something that I'm not understanding here, and I would love to be enlightened on that. Was that? Oh, he's gone. Yeah.
So I think, I mean, if Ms. Shanahan, to your point, I mean, if I read that, shall be severely empowered to examine and require into all such matters as may be referred to them by the House, to report from time to time, and except when the House otherwise orders, to send for persons, papers. So it speaks, I think it speaks more broadly to the mandate of the committee. And so I think that may be where the confusion lies a little bit, but
you can see why, clerk, why I'm questioning that wording, because typically what I've seen in other resolutions, and goodness knows I've seen quite a few of these motions, it usually has to do with that kind of residual power where the committee can just decide to study whatever it likes to study. And I'm looking for that in the excellent briefing note that we had. Yeah, which is later on. Yeah, additional powers of standing committees.
You may be referring to 108.3H then?
Yes, that sounds familiar, okay. Yes.
Which speaks to the general powers of the committee, correct?
Yeah, so I would really like to know from the proposer of this motion which one he's referring to, because I think that, you know, clarity and definition, clarity of terms and definition, and, you know, what are we really about here? Because otherwise you feel like someone just pulled this together, you know, with a whole bunch of copy-paste or something. It's possible.
Yeah,
Est-ce que c'est possible?
Yeah, so maybe I can clarify it then, that the the standing orders that's referred to in the motion, 1A, speaks to the general powers of the committee. 1083H speaks to the specific powers of the committee. Overall, 1A and 3H, I think in reference, as it's referenced to in the motion that was presented by Mr. Barrett, I think it actually encompasses all of the powers, general and specific, of what the committee is able to do. And so the specific of 1A speaks to the general powers of the committee, which we're dealing with, and that is very much, well, it's what you read, right? That the standing committees shall be severely empowered to examine and inquire into all such matters as may be referred to the House. In this case, it's not. It's being proposed by a member, and report from time to time, except when the House otherwise orders to send for persons, papers, records to sit while the House is sitting. So I mean, you could cut it both ways, but in overall terms, the general powers of the committee are reflected in this particular motion, and that's, I don't know whether that clarifies it for you, but from my standpoint, referencing the general powers of the committee, I think, is suffice, and then the specific powers, as I said, are covered under 1083H. So,
well, Chair, far be it from me to stand on points of grammar, but there does seem to be something odd about that formulation where the House may do something, or the committee may pick up something that the House refers to it. It seems like there's a subject, there's an object, and there's a qualifier there, and that does not seem to be the case. It does not seem to have anything to do with the motion that's in front of us, but as I understand, the proposer is no longer with us, and I don't see that anyone on the Conservative side is, jumping up with their hands to provide an explanation. I can see that maybe it was just cobbled together, and I accept your attempt to clarify that. So I will continue.
Just to clarify even further, it's not unusual, Ms. Shanahan, for these type of motions to come back with this specific number in it. It speaks to the general mandate of the committee, so it's not that unusual. And the reference to Mr. Barrett no longer being here, and I'm sure he's busy somewhere else. Mr. Williamson is here in his place, and is fully substituted in as a member of this committee. So I'm trying to clarify the difference as best I can. From my standpoint, one is as good as the other in terms of the general mandate and the specific mandate. This motion is in order, and it does speak to the general mandate of the committee. That's what 108.1A speaks to. So,
I think we're on the same team as far as trying to clarify what this motion is attempting to do. There is, I can have an issue with some of the other wording, which may be, again, more of, one Russia. How many of us wear different hats, Chair, in our roles. For example, I'm the Member of Parliament for Chateauguay-Lacal, bientôt Châteauguay-les-Jardins de Napierville, but I'm also the Chair of the National Liberal Caucus, and I'm also a member of this committee. So we have different roles. So in the same way, the Prime Minister has different roles, and indeed his role vis-a-vis the Liberal Party is as leader of the Liberal Party. And so when the text refers to Mark Carney being recently appointed, he's appointed by the leader of the Liberal Party as an advisor, as a chair to the Liberal Party's task force on economic growth. And I salute the member for, getting the name of the task force right, because we know there's a number of different task force and committees and forums and so on, and sometimes those names can be easily confused. But on that note, Mr. Barrett has the right name of the Liberal Party's task force on economic growth, but he does not have the right title for, indeed, it is the leader of the Liberal Party. It's not the Prime Minister, not in his role as Prime Minister, but the leader of the Liberal Party. And, you know, if we get to the meat now of the motion, what is Mr. Barrett trying to do here? Well, I gather he's very concerned about conflicts of interest. He's very concerned about conflicts of interest amongst those people. And, you know, we are fortunate in Canada that we have many experienced people who provide their advice, who have you know, extensive education, expertise, and most importantly, real-world experience in a number of different areas. But they're not elected necessarily. They are advisors. They are working. They're appointed to different forums or a task force. They can be a staff member, but it's. If they're a staff member, well, then we can see where our rules and regulations and legislation concerning conflict of interest can come into play. If they are an elected member, we can see where our rules and regulations and legislation around conflict of interest and ethics comes into play. But, you know, I think Mr. Barrett brings up a valid concern about what about people who are acting in a volunteer or, you know, ad hoc or periodic or regular advisory role to any leader of any party, indeed. And one might question, because of course any leader of any party is lobbied, is under constant scrutiny, a constant pressure. And so it's reasonable to have questions around, you know, what's the background, what's the profile, what's the nature of the people surrounding a leader of a, in this case, we're talking about federal parties. We're not going to get into the provinces. That's another story altogether. But that we should, you know, is this the purview then of this committee to be considering what is going to know more and to understand better, and perhaps be in a position to make some recommendations that would, in fact, better protect the integrity of our way of governing, of our way of basically our democratic system, which is reliant primarily on democratically elected representatives of Canadians across the country. But, you know, it's good to know who and how the people around leaders who wield tremendous influence and ability to move matters. It would be good to know more about them and what, if anything, should be done by this committee or recommended by this committee. So in that regard, Chair, I would like to move an amendment. And I think I have it here.
Okay, go ahead, Ms. Shanahan, with your amendment.
You're lucky that I didn't give you this copy because it's all written up the sides of the previous papers. So okay. I've got it here. So I move following the line 6-month high, and that Jenny Byrne, who is the well-known special advisor to Pierre Poilievre, as well as a registered lobbyist for grocery multinational Loblaws, at a time that the Poilievre Conservatives are voting against every Liberal government measure to make grocery prices more affordable for Canadians, and that Jenny Byrne, who regularly attends caucus meetings and daily morning strategy calls, is not listed as an employee in Pierre Poilievre's office to shield her from public disclosure and conflict of interest laws, and that Jenny Byrne established a second lobbying firm working from the same office as Jenny Byrne Plus Associates to circumvent federal lobbying laws. And then we would go to that pursuant to Standing Order 1081A. I'm still not in agreement with it, but that's what it is. The committee call upon Mark Carney and Jenny Byrne to testify before the committee within 14, Chair, did you want to add the 14 calendar days? Because you made that specification of the adoption of this motion. For 2 hours each.
Do you have the text for us, Ms. Shanahan?
I do.
You can send that to me.
Yeah.
I'd like to have a look at it if you don't mind. Hold on. Okay. So I'm going to ask that you send that, and then in the meantime, I am going to suspend until I get a chance to have a look at it. So if you can send that to the clerk, that would be terrific. Thank you. We're going to suspend for a minute. That you just sent to everyone.
Yes.
Okay, when you cut through it all, which I have, what we're dealing with is an amendment to Mr. Barrett's motion to have Mark Carney come before the committee, and then Madam Shanahan has moved an amendment to have Jenny Byrne testify before the committee, adding a time of 2 hours each, and we're all in agreement based on the motion of 14 calendar days. So cutting through all of the preamble, all of it, that's what we're dealing with right now. So on the amendment to have Jenny Byrne appear before committee, Ms. Shanahan, go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to, I thank the clerk for putting this together fairly quickly, but I think grammatically it makes more sense where, because we say and that Jenny Byrne, so that first bolded part of the amendment, and that Jenny Byrne, and that Jenny Byrne. Because otherwise, I don't think it makes sense with just the semicolon.
We were trying to. It's both proposals are very wordy. So obviously trying to capture everything. But I think if we were to capture this, the last line captures it all. Preamble notwithstanding.
Because in the French, you see that, that the que is there, que Jenny Byrne, qui assiste, que Jenny Byrne. So the end that, because it all flows from that original given that.
Good. Okay. We'll make the correction. We'll send it out. But the premise of the motion is that Mark Carney comes for 2 hours on the main motion. The amendment says that Jenny Byrne comes for 2 hours within 14 calendar days. That's the basis of what we're dealing with right now. So on the amendment, Mr. Fisher, go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank the clerk for her efforts putting all of that together. And it's never an easy thing to combine things on the fly, and this looks like it's very close to what I heard from the floor. and I'll support the amendment. It's interesting. I'm sure every party has advisors. Every party has advisors that have other things going on in their lives and other business prospects. So certainly this is something that's worth supporting. I would urge members to support the amendment and then see what these folks have to say. I don't really have much more to add to that. I'm just reading this over because it was spoken into, and again, thank the clerk for this. But it looks like what I heard from Ms. Shanahan is articulated very well here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fisher. And for the benefit of the committee, we're trying to calculate with all the suspensions. The clerk is in the process of doing that right now to figure out what time we have resources to. And it looks like right now that's 6:32. So go ahead, Ms. Khalid.
Thank you very much, Chair, and happy to speak on the amendment as presented by Ms. Shanahan, and also to be here till 6:30. It's always a pleasure to spend lots of time with all of you guys. So just, kind of putting into context, and I really appreciate you kind of bringing it down to what the value of this motion is and what this motion practically is trying to do, including the amendment. It is to ensure that that political parties and governments of the day or what have you have the ability to make sure that checks and balances are in place with respect to whoever advises the political party of the day or the political party of concern. And I think for me, the broader question is about what kinds of checks and balances are missing from this process. So whether it is, the Liberal leader appointing Mark Carney to the Liberal Party of Canada as the chair of the Liberal Party's task force on economic growth, or whether it is the leader of the Conservative Party appointing Jenny Byrne to advise on, I really don't know what she advises on, to be honest, other than to run campaigns. But beside the point, I think the point that we're trying to make here is that removing the partisanship is really, really important for us to get to the improvement of the potential conflict of interest, the removal of the potential challenges that political parties could run into, while also ensuring that where expertise is available, expertise should be used. Where expertise is lacking within any organization, whether it's in the Conservative Party or the NDP or the Bloc or the Liberals, that we do actively seek out where we can fill that void of expertise. But we need to do that in a responsible way. We need to do that in a way that respects the values of our democratic institutions, and that makes sure that there aren't any conflicts, that makes sure that that makes sure that there's checks and balances in how we conduct ourselves, not just in the way that we operate as members of Parliament, but also with our partisan hats as well, and what roles and responsibilities and checks and balances we should have in place within our political system as well. And I think Ms. Shanahan very rightly pointed this out to say that it's about the perception of democratic institutions. It's about the perception of holding what we are trying to do here, this place, it to account, and to make sure that those checks and balances are not just in existence, but also are being fulfilled. That onus is not just on the government of the day. That onus is on each and every single political party that operates in this place in a partisan way. And I think that, when we're talking, and I know we spent the first hour talking about foreign interference, we have been going into this major campaign of misinformation, disinformation, the study. I think that really understanding and appreciating how the perception of conflict of interest can play a role in the value of democratic institutions and how democratic institutions are perceived by the general public, I think this would be a good study for us to hear. And, as Mr. Vieux-Mur has said, we need to be more efficient with our time. And that's why I support the 2 hours piece to this amendment. Now, I will talk a little bit more because I know that Mr. Barrett, while he was here, had spoken at length about why he was bringing forward this motion. So I perhaps will add as to why Ms. Byrne needs to be added to this motion because of exactly what I was outlining, that perception. So Ms. Byrne is the current chief advisor, the political strategist, and the confidant to the leader of the opposition or the leader of the Conservative Party, while she is also an active lobbyist. Now, recent media coverage has confirmed that a lobbying firm run by Ms. Byrne has established a second company that's housed out of the same office. So there's a bit of a perception issue here, and obviously we take everything at face value, want to give everybody the benefit of the doubt, but we are talking about the perception of conflict of interest and ultimately how that leads to deteriorating trust within our democratic institutions. So it would appear that Ms. Byrne's firm is actively lobbying at the federal level, and that includes current Conservative members of Parliament, while she's taking steps to hide that activity. And that is what has been reported in the media. So all of my information is coming from open source, from what has been reported in our news. So as I was saying, this raises some serious questions as to what extent Ms. Byrne is personally involved in that federal lobbying piece, and whether or not she's in compliance with the laws that are related to ethics and with lobbying in this country. And I think that as we're kind of drawing parallels here, we need to have a broader picture, a broader understanding of how we can amend our rules and regulations to ensure that this kind of perception of conflict does not occur. So I think that with this amendment makes this motion very balanced. It removes the partisanship from this motion to talk about a very serious issue. And I will park my comments there, Chair. And I do want to support this motion. And I think that the more we can do to ensure that the partisanship is taken out, I think the better we will be in a position to ensure that democratic values and that perception of conflict of interest does not exist, regardless of hyper-partisanship from whichever party it comes from. Thank you, Chair. I'll leave my comments here for now, but I do reserve the right to get back on that list. Thanks, Chair.
Ms. Khalid, I'm going to go to Mr. Caputo next on the amendment, followed by Ms. Shanahan and Mr. Fisher. Go ahead, Mr. Caputo.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciated Ms. Khalid's soliloquy about partisanship and hyper-partisanship, because it is against that backdrop that I'm really happy to move an amendment that would read as follows. I have sent it to the clerk, and it would clean up a lot of the language, and it would state as follows: that pursuant to Standing Order 108 sub 1 sub A, the committee call upon Mark Carney, Guratan Singh, and Jenny Byrne to testify before the committee for 2 hours each within 14 calendar days of the adoption of this motion. So if we want to...
Hang on, Mr. Caputo. So you're proposing to strike the preamble
Yes.
of the motion and just deal directly with the motion. And now you're adding as a sub-amendment Mr. Guratan Singh, because we've already had amendment moved to include Ms. Byrne. The main motion was to, so you're adding as
This would be a sub-amendment, I guess.
a
or
sub-amendment.
An amendment to the sub-amendment.
I apologize to the interpreters. I just hit the microphone. Just give me a second, please.
Okay. And sorry, that would be with respect to... Oh, sorry. Oh, did he? Okay. It's one for Mark Carney.
Do you guys don't have anybody from the block? You just make everything. Their optimal is slacking.
Right in the back. His links to the tobacco industry. So, Mr. Caputo, we've dealt with this before at committee, and the clerk just reminded me of this. We're currently on an amendment that includes Ms. Byrne. What I'd like to do is to dispose of that amendment, and then rather than you propose a sub-amendment, to come back with another amendment that would include, whatever happens with the amendment, to have you come back and propose an amendment that would include Mr. Singh, which I heard you say. So rather than accept that as a sub-amendment, I'm going to give you an opportunity, once this amendment is disposed of, to come back and deal with it as an amendment to the motion as amended, if that provides any clarity. Okay? Okay, Mr. Williams, I'll put you on the list.
I'll yield my time to Mr. Williamson here.
I've got a list. So, but I am going to come. I will come back to you, Mr. Caputo, when the time is right. I've got Ms. Shanahan, Fisher, and then Mr. Fisher, and then Mr. Williamson. Go ahead, Ms. Shanahan.
A point of order.
Sorry. Go ahead. Point of order.
I think some clarification needed from Ms. Khalid, who had said she reserves the right to be added to the list. That's not quite a clear she'd like to be added to the list, and I think you need to seek that, because Ms. Khalid and I have had a disagreement on another committee about her. Not at all. You are a generic.
I'm going to stop both of you right now. I try to the best of my ability to see who's raising their hand, who wants to intervene. And have some discussion on this, and so we're going to maintain that same standard. So I've got Ms. Shanahan, Mr. Fisher, and then Mr. Williamson on the list. Go ahead, Ms. Shanahan. On the amendment, please.
The amendment, yeah, on my amendment, thank you. Because I did want to add something to just to clarify. Because we hear a lot of pejorative language being used when people's names are used in motions and amendments, and that's not what I'm about. And I want to make it very clear, I do not know Ms. Byrne. I may have met her briefly in a progressive conservative leadership convention back in the 70s, or yes, it could be. No, probably. I think she's a little younger than I am, but when I moved in those circles. But I do not know her personally, and I am not someone that would ever approve or be party to the kind of denigration that I have seen other members partake of when they talk about members of the public, whether or not they are advisors or linked to any particular party or what have you. And so that's all the only comment that I wanted to make there, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. Mr. Fisher, go ahead. On the amendment, please.
And thank you. I was grasping for the thought I had when I was speaking last time on the amendment, and I just wanted to touch on my thoughts on that. The Conservatives have voted against every effort to do whatever we could in the House of Commons to reduce grocery prices. And then the connection of Ms. Byrne to Loblaws makes it a question that I certainly would love to ask of her. So again, going back to my comments earlier, I would support the amendment, and that's all.
Okay, on the amendment, Mr. Williamson, please.
Thank you. With your ruling recognized, I'd like to move an amendment to the amendment. Then this is largely to both remove the description of both individuals, so we just really get down to the core of what we're debating here, which I think members would. I hope members would agree is where we're trying to get. And this, in my, I move that we strike what is on offer, and that and we debate that pursuant to Standing Order 1081A, the committee call upon Mark Carney and Jenny Byrne to testify before the committee for 2 hours each within 14 calendar days of the adoption of this motion. So I think you'll find that's in order. It just clarifies what it clarifies what is in fact we are debating without additional language, additional baggage that I think both sides are struggling with. So we have a clean motion that really gets to the heart of what we're debating here. It does not take away from either the motion or the amendment to the motion, but wraps it up, shortens it, and cleans it up.
So the challenge with that, and I get where you want to go with this, Mr. Williamson. I think I made my position on this clear, that we're dealing effectively with the last line. But part of the amendment that we're dealing with is the description or the addition to the preamble over and above what the main motion is. You understand what I'm saying? The amendment that was proposed starts after a 6-month high. So we're dealing with an amendment that has 3 paragraphs in it, and then the addition of Ms. Byrne in the last part of that motion. So the challenge for you in proposing that is that it doesn't reflect accurately what you're wanting to do. So that's why my suggestion is that we dispose of the amendment. We can continue to have debate on this, and then come back, and if it's the will of the members to delete the preambles and just deal with the heart of what this motion is all about and what the amendment potentially is all about, then we can look to add to that amendment, which includes deletion of the preamble. Okay, so you're only dealing with half the issue right now. That's the problem. You're not dealing with the top half, which was moved in the main motion. You're dealing with the second half, which was moved in the amendment. Okay, so I appreciate where you're going with this. I don't have any other speakers on the list. So I am going to move to the amendment. Do we have consensus on the amendment? Okay, so we got consensus. Mr. You want votes?
Yeah, let's
okay.
record it.
So on the amendment, on the amendment, we're going to move to the clerk now to take the roll on the amendment, which everybody has clearly established, to add Ms. Byrne, notwithstanding all the preamble, 2 hours, 14 calendar days. Go ahead, Madam Clerk, on the roll.
So the vote is on the amendment moved by Ms. Shanahan. Mr. Baines?
Yes.
Mr. Fisher?
We.
Mr. Housewater?
Yes.
Ms. Khalid?
Yes.
Ms. Shanahan?
Yes.
Mr. Williamson?
No.
Mr. Caputo?
No.
Mr. Cooper?
No.
You don't want to be on the list.
Monsieur Simard?
Wait.
Mr. Green,
Yeah, I'm going to support this.
yeas 7, nays 3.
Okay, so the motion as amended carries. I'm going to go to Mr. Caputo now. Mr. Caputo, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to move an amendment, and that would read as follows. That pursuant to Standing Order 108 sub 1 sub A, the committee call upon Mark Carney to testify before the committee for 2 hours, and Jenny Byrne and Guratan Singh to testify before the committee for 1 hour, each within 14 calendar days of the adoption of this motion.
If you guys can get 2 hours of questions out of Grattan, all the power to you.
We said one.
No, I'm not going to support this. Bring everybody for 2.
So, Mr. Caputo, just to be clear, because you did indicate before,
For Ms. Burns.
you did indicate before that you wanted to delete the preamble. I didn't hear you say that. I hear you went to the.
Sorry, that would be the
Right.
extent.
So
I'm
the
sorry.
extent of the motion, of the amendment that you're proposing is to effectively have Mr. Carney for 2 hours, have Ms. Byrne for 1 hour, and then Mr. Singh for 1 hour, correct? And you're looking to delete the preamble, correct?
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct.
All right.
Mr. Chair, just a point of order. Is that even in order?
I'm just give me a second here. I'm going to
Thank you.
discuss this with the clerk, but
Thank you.
Hang on a sec, please. So, just for clarity, and I appreciate your question. I saw clarity from the clerk on this. It's my opinion that the amendment would be in order because he's adding another to the witness list, and he's dealing with time. So, in my view, that the amendment is in order as proposed by Mr. Caputo. So, on the amendment proposed by Mr. Caputo.
Thank you very much, Chair. So, just to clarify, the amendment is proposing that Mr. Carney appear for 2 hours. Ms. Byrne, who was in the original amendment or the amended motion, slated to appear for 2 hours, now appear for 1 hour. And that Mr. Singh, who we don't really know where he fits in within the context of this motion, should also appear for 1 hour. Now, I'm not really sure why there's a differentiation within the different times assigned to the proposed witnesses. I also don't see any justification as to why Mr. Singh should appear, and I don't think that any argument has been made as to how he fits within the narrative of Mr. Kearney, Ms. Byrne. And so I think that that this amendment is a little bit half-baked and a little bit suspicious, as Mr. Cooper would say, in that we don't know why there's a differentiation, and we don't know why this extra name is being added without any context as to why it's being added. So I, Chair, would really appreciate some clarity from the mover of the amendment, and if I can get back onto the floor once we've had clarity, that would be great.
You're right.
I do have a list, but if I'm going to go to Mr. Cooper and then Ms. Shanahan after that. But Mr. Cooper, you had your hand up on the amendment?
On the amendment, I'd like to move a sub-amendment but I understand your previous ruling.
Yeah.
But it would be very simply
to
remove Gurtan Singh.
Yeah.
So remove the provision for him to appear, and it would leave the balance of the amendment intact, namely that Mr. Carney would appear for 2 hours and Ms. Byrne for 1 hour.
Okay, that's again. I'm gonna deal.
Pardon, Monsieur le Président. Sans texte, simplement avec la.
Sorry, it's very difficult to follow.
It's hard for me as well, Mr. Simard. We're talking about an amendment, and we're adding a sub-amendment to the amendment. We're going to look at the amendment first, and if Mr. Cooper would like to propose another amendment following that amendment, we will have to make a decision.
So we're on the amendment proposed by Mr. Caputo. We're on the amendment proposed by Mr. Caputo, and so I had Mr. Cooper. I'm going to come back to you after Mr. Cooper, but I'm going to go to Ms. Shanahan now on the amendment proposed by Mr. Caputo. Ms. Shanahan, go ahead.
OK, justement, je suis contente là, quand même de.
I'm happy to be able to better understand what we're looking at. But I would like to start by saying that was not the goal of my amendment. We wanted to have Mr. Carney for 2 hours and Miss Jenny Byrne for 2 hours. I'm not sure if they should be together or separate. It's the kind of discussion that we could have during a subcommittee meeting if we really want to look into this matter. We want to look at it. We're not going into the details of their lives. We just want to hear their perspective and know how they see their work and what the measures are that they have taken or not taken or considered in order to manage not only conflicts of interest, which are important, of course, but also it's a matter of perception on conflicts of interest. It could be quite interesting. We could have both witnesses for 2 hours. I think that they are professionals. They're not competitors, to my knowledge. And they both are financial advisors for federal parties here in Canada. Mr. Singh, well, I'm not sure what the backstory is. We had discussed those two people. And who suggested that? It was in Mr. Caputo's amendment, correct? We heard from Mr. Williamson that he wanted to get rid of the preamble that spoke to the backgrounds of the two witnesses, but now there wouldn't be anything on Mr. Singh. So I'm not sure what's going on there. And I would also like to share the frustration of my colleague, Mr. Simard, that we're dealing with amendments and sub-amendments ad nauseum. And the chair can give us time and perhaps suggest that we talk to each other in order to write a motion that makes sense. I've seen this before in public accounts, and things went quite well. And everyone was satisfied with the result. But I do not support this amendment that I find illogical. 2 hours for one witness, 1 hour for another. I don't think that makes any sense. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Shanahan.
On the amendment is Mr. Caputo. Go ahead.
Could I just have a point of order before you go to Mr. Caputo?
Go ahead, point of order.
So at 6:21, we received a notice of motion as presumably as amended by either Mr. Williamson or Mr. Caputo or Mr. Cooper. I'm not sure which, but it strictly strikes everything out, and I don't remember Mr. Caputo saying that. I do remember Mr. Williamson saying that, but I don't remember Mr. Cooper saying that. So are we suggesting that now all of the preamble is gone based on the email we just got at 6:21?
Well, we haven't disposed of Mr. Caputo's amendment yet. I think what was sent to you was a proposal, what reflects accurately what Mr. Caputo's amendment was, and that is to delete the entirety of the preamble and then just deal with that last line that's there. That's what we're on right now. So effectively what we're on right now is Carney for 2 hours, Byrne for 1, Singh for 1, 14-day calendar days. That's the amendment that we're on right now.
The preamble's all gone.
He proposed to delete the preamble.
I don't remember that.
Yeah,
Okay.
well, I know Mr. Williamson brought it up,
Right.
but I know Mr. Caputo did bring it up as well, Mr.
Okay,
Fisher.
so the motion that's on the floor right now is Mr. Caputo's, not Mr. Williamson's.
The motion that's on the floor right now, or the amendment that's on the floor right now, is that delete the entirety of the preamble.
Okay.
And I'm going to say this, frankly, preambles on these type of motions have no business being in a motion, to be quite frank, regardless of who's proposing it. You want to deal with something, deal with it directly. But what we're dealing with on the amendment is that pursuant to Standing Order 108-1A, the committee call upon Mark Carney for 2 hours, as well as Guratan Singh and Jenny Byrne for 1 hour each to testify before the committee within 14 calendar days of the adoption of this motion. That's the amendment that we're dealing with right now. The preamble is proposed to be gone. Mr. Caputo, you have the floor. Does that clarify that for you, Mr. Fisher?
That's not what I understood, but I got the clarification I was seeking. Thank you.
Simplement.
Appel de règlement.
Juste pour être.
Point of order. You did not add Mr. Singh. I didn't hear that in the translation, or in the interpretation, rather. If Mr. Singh is in it, in the amendment, Mr. Singh would be in the motion for 1 hour.
C'est correct, Monsieur Simard? Okay. Mr. Barrett, on the point of order, I assume, or no debate? Point of order?
No, on that point of order, Chair. The text that Mr. Fisher references with the text that Mr. Fisher references, was that what form did that take in its circulation? So I'm rejoining after having been in the House dealing with the Speaker's ruling on the last report that you tabled from the committee. But
so I haven't been sending them out. I know the clerk has been on this, so I'm going to get the clerk to advise you on the question that you've asked.
I'm happy to take that offline if that's easier.
Let's do that offline.
Or I can say it seems like everybody, including myself, or we may be a little bit confused, everybody. And I do a lot of things on track changes, so I'm hoping that I sent you one of the many versions on track changes. The amendment from Ms. Shanahan, that was agreed to, okay? So the amendment from Ms. Shanahan was to add some text regarding Jenny Byrne and to add that she also be invited, and it was for 2 hours each, okay? Now, we are back.
2 hours for Ms. Byrne and for Mr. Carney. Okay.
So now we're
And
back.
each.
Now what we're dealing with is Mr. Caputo's proposal to strike the entirety of the preamble, and then to have Mr. Carney appear for 2 hours, Ms. Byrne and Mr. Singh for 1 hour within 14 calendar days of the motion being adopted. Am I correct?
Back on the motion, debate came back on the motion as amended.
Right.
And then from there, delete every kind of preamble.
Yep.
And then leave the part that delete everything that is part of a preamble, and then leave that pursuant to standing 108.1, the committee called upon Mark Carney for 2 hours, and then add as well as Garantan Singh. That's part of the new amendment. And Jenny Byrne, that was already adopted. And then instead of being for 2 hours each, then it becomes 2 hours for Mark Carney. Then we add Garantan Singh and Jenny Byrne for 1 hour each within 14 calendar days of the adoption of this
And so
motion.
just my last question, if I can,
Yep.
to the clerk chair is, so I see the amendment about Ms. Byrne, and I understand the new change proposed by Mr. Caputo. So my staff have sent me these. Where did the insertion come up with respect to Mr. Singh? It was a sub amendment to Ms.
It was an
Shanahan's?
amendment to
The amended motion.
Right.
Understood. Okay, thank you very much.
So, that being said, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but we are out of time and resources. This meeting is adjourned.